A new report says the International Olympic Committee is set to ban biological men from competing in women's events. The New York Times says the change will be officially announced early next year. The decision to overhaul the current policy was made after a committee carried out a science-based review of biologically born men and their physical differences from women. Sources told the New York Times the evidence was scientific, factual, and unemotional. It is not clear if the guidance will be ready for the Winter Games in 2026 in Italy. The next Summer Olympics is in Los Angeles in 2028. The Supreme Court allows the Trump administration to require passports to list the applicant's biological sex. The order is seen as a victory in efforts to roll back transgender ideology and federal policy. The nation's highest court says requiring biological sex on a passport is roughly the same as displaying the applicant's country of birth, adding the government is merely attesting to a historical fact without subjecting anyone to differential treatment. The decision overturns a lower court order. The lawsuit was brought by a woman who identifies as a man. For more, we turn to Julie Gunlock, director of the Independent Women's Forum Center for Progress and Innovation. Julie, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, there's a lot to discuss, including the Supreme Court order on passports and biological sex. But first, can we turn to the report on the Olympics likely barring biological men from women's events? What do you make of this report and its timing?
This is great news, and it's been a long time coming. This is a science-based policy that affirms biological reality. It restores fairness to women's athletics on the international stage. Now, I will tell you, there's an awful lot of women out there who've been asking for this for years. The fact that the Olympics finally recognized what should have been obvious all along, there is some frustration, I think, among some athletes. Look, these women, they have lost medals, they've lost scholarships, they've lost a living, and some of them were actually hurt having to compete against men. So while this is good news, there are an awful lot of women who are going, what took so long?
Now, remind us again about the Olympics policy towards transgender athletes. It seems like some events allowed biological men and others did not, at least in qualifying.
Yeah, they had it depended on how long you had been on cross-sex hormones. They would test people, but science shows, the scientific studies show that the men who've gone through puberty, they have strengths post-puberty that can't be reversed. So we're talking about the capacity in their lungs, the largeness of their hearts, the ability to throw things faster and a longer distance. That doesn't go away. You can take a cross-sex hormone, but it doesn't take away the fact that you have that strength that's sort of built in. So now they're just saying, look, we are not going to go through all this trickery. We're not going to try to make sense of this. We're going back to common sense. Women compete against women, men compete against men. That is the way forward.
Now, let's turn to the Supreme Court order on the listings of biological birth on a passport. What can you tell us about it?
Well, this was a case of the Supreme Court blocking a temporary hold that was put on by a activist federal judge in, no surprise, Massachusetts, that would have required the State Department to issue passports to transgender identifying Americans that reflected their sex designation, so whatever they chose on their passport. That obviously makes no sense. And now the Supreme Court is saying, okay, displaying a passport holder's sex at birth is no more offensive than displaying their country of birth. I mean, frankly, I'd love to say that I'm Italian or I'm French, but this is a security issue. This is what everyone forgets. We're not so far away from 9/11, and passports are a security document. And so the idea that we're just going to put on there a sex that does not correspond to the biological reality was nonsense. So I am very grateful to the Supreme Court for setting this activist judge correctly and really returning things back to normal.
And as we mentioned, it was an unsigned order. What does that mean, and is it relevant?
Well, it's an unsigned order, meaning that the court did not, the opinion wasn't signed by one of the judges. So we're not sure who authored this particular ruling. And I'm, to be honest with you, I'm not sure why.
Well, Julie, thank you so much for being with us and sharing this perspective.
Thanks for having me.